First, let's give a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I had the only experience I had was in China, was about 12 years ago. I was invited to speak at Wuhan University in China in April of 2010. And I always tell people I was in Beijing and then Wuhan, Beijing, Wuhan, then Shanghai, and then back to Toronto. But I always tell people that the one bad experience that I had at Wuhan University was green tea. They gave me too much. Too much. I wanted coffee. And every day, green tea, green tea. But I really enjoyed my trip to China. And I think when you visit another country, you have a greater appreciation. You appreciate the people more when you meet the people. And Beijing, of course, so many people, and when you cross the street, forget about whether the light is red or green, just cross. That's okay. And then Wuhan, of course, I spent most of the time at the university, not in the city itself. And then Shanghai. And the one thing that really impressed me, and I had no really appreciation about Shanghai because of my own particular background, was the Jewish section of Shanghai. I had no idea how much China did for the Jewish people in 1940, 1939. And to see that section of Shanghai was absolutely unbelievable. So it gave me a greater appreciation for China and for the people of China. And I was just saying a few minutes ago, and I appreciate being invited to speak to you, that, and this is my experience after 50 years, people who are born in Canada, don't know where to go to find out information about laws. So you can imagine, I can imagine, if English is not a person's first language, it's 10 times harder. 10 times harder. So it's hard enough knowing where to go to get help, and then of course where English is a challenge for people, as it is for a lot of people, it makes it even harder. And I think another thing that we sometimes forget is culture. People think, some people think that, that you live in North America, you have the best culture. Well, that's not true. We had this crazy President of the United States. So, I mean, it shows you. But it's an understanding of other cultures, and not, our culture is not the best culture. The culture, there's no culture that's perfect. Before we criticize others, we should look at our own. I say that because people will come from a culture where, if you mention, for example, the police, it's bad. In North America, we look at it hopefully differently, that if somebody has a problem, they should be able to go to the police. But again, if you come from a culture where you're afraid of the police, it makes it difficult. It makes it more difficult. So it's a cultural thing, and I don't know whether the values are different. I can tell you that when I was in family court, I was lucky enough to be a judge for 38 years, and of my 38 years, there were 12, I spent 12 years in civil, and then 22 in family court, and then the last 4.5 in criminal court. But in my 22 years in family court, I never, virtually never, dealt with people from China about children and about families, because I appreciated and I understood how important family is. And you see it if you treat each other with respect and understanding, and raising your children to have values. And that's what it's about, values. Then you're not going to come into contact with the law. You know. So I understood and appreciated the importance of family that I wish we had, you know, here as much as in other cultures. Interestingly, thank you. This was, when I was in law school, which is over 50 years ago, I understood, and it hasn't changed 100%, but it's changed a little bit, that there was a law for men and there was a law for women. So this is why I did this book. I wrote this book, The Law Is Not for Women, in 1976, before some of you were probably born. But that's okay, you're forgiven, you're forgiven. So this was in 1976. This woman was a writer, so I approached her and said, can we do, this is my idea of a book, and I'll write the book and you can rewrite it. So we wrote a book, The Law Is Not for Women, in 1976, and it was talking about the laws in 1976, many of which have not changed, about the fact that women today are paid less than men for the same job, and certainly the rights of women have changed. There used to be, they used to say that when a woman got married, when a man and a woman got married, the woman became part of the man. She was not independent, she didn't have her own rights, and and I think that's changed quite a bit in the last 50-odd years. So this was an area we wrote about, and this book that I wrote about 3 years ago deals with the rights of children. The law is not for kids. This was, I did this with somebody in 2019. We're actually doing a new revision this year. But it's been mentioned about education and teaching and children. And certainly people have to become aware, if any of you have issues involving your children, you should go to the school and speak to the teacher, speak to the principal. But there's something else that's important. Sometimes when you complain, and I don't mean you, I mean when people complain, nobody does anything. My child is being bullied by somebody else. My child is being made fun of by somebody else. And you go to the teacher, and the teacher does nothing. You go to the principal, and maybe the principal does nothing. So, I always tell my students 3 words. If you remember 3 words that I talk about in this course, you know, you teach a course for 12, 13 weeks, 3 hours a week, blah, blah, blah. But I tell my students, if you remember 3 words, forgetting about everything else, it's documentation, documentation, documentation. Document everything, even if it's just an email. So you don't want, when you have a complaint about anything with anybody, send an email to them. And interestingly, not only send an email to them, send that same email to yourself so you have a record. You don't want people to say 3 weeks from now or a month from now or 2 months from now, well, you never told me, you never said anything, you never did anything. That's garbage. So you want to document. And if somebody says don't put it in writing, that's garbage. You put things in writing. That is to protect yourself and to protect your children. In any situation, whether it's family law, whether it's criminal law, whether it's civil law, you want to document. It's so important. As we're going along this morning, if anybody has any specific questions, feel free to ask. If you could mention to them that if there's any personal experience that they have that they want to bring up, I'm happy to discuss it.
主科教授说，如果你们有什么问题，可以随时提出来，最好是有一些你们个人碰过的、经过的案例，这提出来，主科这个教授会跟你们再详细一点去讲解。
Yeah, I tell my own students the same thing, that if you, as teachers and educators and vice principals or whatever, you have an experience, bring it up so we can discuss it. At this point in time, does anybody have any specific questions? Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, we would like to know, so for our teaching, before start class, should we put a agreement between the teacher and the parents and the students for during the teaching process in class, we touching the body or something like that. Just some kind of document for this kind of thing.
That's a very good question. There's no law. There is no law that says you cannot just touch a student to help a student. There's no law. There is a law about using force there is a law, there's, I don't wanna be too technical, there's something called there's section 43 of the criminal code which says a teacher may use reasonable force by way of correction. So if two kids are fighting, a teacher could break up the fight. But you're, you know, if I'm, there's nothing, I mean, this is, the problem is, whether you're talking about teaching somebody to play music, or you're coaching somebody, gymnastics or something, and you're touching parts of their body, there's nothing the matter with that, it's when you go beyond that. So that's, it's very difficult. Teachers, coaches, people should be trained, you know, this is something, I have written so, you know, I'm sorry to say, I've written so many articles criticizing the Minister of Education in Ontario that it gives me a headache, because the poor man doesn't know what he's doing. But the bottom line is, there's no law that says you cannot touch a child. It's when you touch somebody wrongly, improperly, that you know, the relationship between the law says that a teacher stands in place of a parent. The teacher is in place of a parent. When a teacher is teaching somebody's child, they become the parent of that child in the school, and therefore they are supposed to treat that child the way you would treat the child as the parent. And that is that is the law that is expected of a teacher. The teacher is in a trust relationship. But to answer that gentleman's question, if I'm touching somebody to help them, there's nothing the matter with that. If it's possible, and if it's possible and people are concerned, then tape it. Tape it so that people will see. I am only, or if you don't tape it, a good thing is always, not always, if you can, a good thing is to have two people. So if you got a child and you've got two people, one person can say, one person can be teaching, the other person can be watching, and the person that's watching can say, he or she was teaching my child properly, and there was nothing improper. Because sometimes a child will go home. I remember a case. A man, somebody I knew, tickled a child at a gym. And the person I knew was a teacher. So child goes home and says, this man tickled me. So the man's father goes crazy. He went to the police, and the man that tickled him was charged with assault. I mean, he was found not guilty, but he had to get a lawyer and everything else. But certainly, if you are concerned about teaching music or coaching, and if you can have somebody watch or tape, then that's what you got to do. That's all. But there's nothing the matter with what you're doing. In terms of physical force, of course, the law says it has to be reasonable. Not only does it have to be reasonable, the child has to understand what you're doing. If you have a special needs child, if you have a child with physical or mental difficulties, and you hit them, that's not reasonable. That's not reasonable. Does anybody else have any, yes, yeah,
May I share something?
yeah, sure.
There's one thing really confused me since the pandemic started. I remember was 2020 beginning. I think as everybody here, you're different roles, you're instructors, you're also a mom. My kid, she was 6 years old at school one day. Okay, let me stand up. Okay, and after she back home, she was crying and she said, "Mommy, they said, not play with me because, sorry, because I'm Chinese. They said, you're Chinese, I'm not going to play with you, that's the friends." I was a little upset with that and I wrote an email to the principal, just as you said, nothing, and asked to the teacher. She said, okay, seems like not big deal for her. And so I will solve it. And after that,
Who said it's not a big deal?
not say not big deal, but you can see, okay, fine, it's okay.
It is a big deal.
You're right,
It is a
exactly.
big deal.
And the teacher said, because maybe the parents hear something, because the China, the COVID something. I said, yes, the kids is like a mirror of them parents. You cannot solve the things like nothing. And then she said, okay, finally get the kids write down something. So next time I will play with Emily, that's it. So the thing is, for me, it's confused is I don't know what's the next step. If the teacher does nothing, if the principal does nothing, the thing is not disappeared. So that's what I'm the confusion. What's the next step? If next time when I meet this kind of situation, what should I
I
do?
mean, you go to the teacher, you go to the principal, maybe you go to the trustee, who may or may not do anything. Or maybe you go to somebody elected to the Board of Education, who may or may not do anything. But your example should be a teaching experience. Your example should be something where the teacher should be talking to the students, all the kids, and say, you know what? We want to treat each other with respect. And we want to we don't want to bully each other. And the problem, people don't get this. People don't get this. The reason, in my opinion, for what it's worth, this child who made a comment about they didn't want to play with
Because
because you're Chinese.
Right.
You know where it comes from? You know where it comes from. It comes from their parents. It comes
Right.
from what you hear.
Right.
That's what it's about. And this is the whole problem. This is where it backs up. People don't understand. I dealt with these kinds of cases in court where men, because it's mostly men, treated the women with disrespect and treated their children with disrespect. It's called a learned behavior. And what a learned behavior, you gotta have a sit, don't,
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't want you to get tired.
Thank you. I'm good. So thoughtful.
A learned behavior is what we learn at home. All of us. I'm the same way. When I think of my history and my own parents, whatever I know or don't know, and probably most what I don't know, but whatever I know or don't know, it's what I saw. If you see good, you're gonna be good. If you see bad, you're gonna be bad. You being a child. And it's unfortunate, you know, I was raised, you talk about China and, you know, I mean, it's different today, but my father, who was a lawyer, had an office for 52 years at the corner of Spadina and Dundas, which is now, I mean, it wasn't then, you know, it was all Jewish, you know. But I learned from him. I learned this one positive thing. I said, we are all, treat everybody the same. We're all the same. We're all equal. So nothing goes through my head about whether you're black or white or this or that, you know. So it's all the environment. When I read in the newspaper 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds killing other people in Toronto. And then we criticize other countries throughout the world. When I see this, where's it coming from? You know. But you raise a very good, all you can do is document and, you know, I don't know whether you did document with respect. Email, yeah, good.
Yeah, but there's
So
no
if you're,
feedback.
no feedback,
No
but
feedback.
that,
Unfortunately.
I mean, you can ask what, you know, if your son or daughter complained again, then I would send the email again. And somebody should tell them that they will be, you know, people don't understand what bullying is about. You know, or criticism, somebody's saying to you about, people don't know that when you say something negative about a person, that person could be 5 years old or 10 years old. You never forget it. I mean, you don't think about it every day, but you never forget it. So you have to spend the time that the teacher should be spending explaining to your child that it's not about you, it's about them. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
我不是 OK， 谢谢第五笔。我不是一个老师，我是一个家长。我知道最近有一些就是对老师的一些的立案的指证，关于性骚扰的。那我想请问，我知道在警察立案到以证，然后到法官判定他那个是合理的接触还是不合法的接触，需要经过一个漫长的时间。那么在这种情况下，我们的文化呢，常常是觉得警察一立案，就觉得是警察找上门来就是一种很羞耻的事情，然后各种各样的压力，其实对被指控的人造成在没有被判罪之前，其实在心理上，在他们的那个社交的那个环境当中，对他们造成了很大的影响。那作为法官的话，根据作为一个法律从业人员的话，你有没有一些分享，应该怎么样去面对
So somebody is accused.
accused？
Okay, so somebody goes to the police today and charges somebody with sexual assault. An accused.
Yes.
Somebody is accused.
So during the time.
So I think what you're saying, you're raising the question of cases take so long
Yeah.
to get to court.
Yeah, and the damage already there. I know the final decision is from the judge, so they are guilty or not guilty. But during that period, like first their picture appeared in the media, and also right now it's all the social media things, all the comments, mostly like posted very negatively. So how?
That's a question that has always been difficult to answer because somebody's accused with a crime
Yeah,
and maybe the picture gets in the newspaper.
yeah,
And 2 years later or 3 years later, they're not guilty.
right,
Or the Crown withdraws the charges
exactly.
and half the people are gonna think they're guilty anyway. Depending on it's not gonna help, but an accused could sue the complainant for malicious prosecution. They could sue. Whether that's gonna help, whether that's gonna be successful or not, I don't know. You have to know the facts of the case. If somebody made it up, I had a family law case, where a woman came to court and she was separated from her husband. And she went to the Children's Aid and told Children's Aid, my husband has been sexually abusing the children, sexually touching them. So Children's Aid got involved, and as a result of Children's Aid getting involved, he was not allowed to see the kids. So eventually I did the trial. But so much, I think, is not how much knowledge, but common sense. And there was something wrong about her allegations, because the children never said anything to their doctor, never said anything to the teacher, never said anything to anybody, except that the mother said, they told me. Anyhow, I eventually decided, and the psychologist agreed with me, that the mother made it up. I ended up giving the children back to the father. And I remember the father coming to me weeks later saying, my children don't want to see the mother anymore. So, people can be charged with a crime. The court has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and sometimes if there's a reasonable doubt, well, not sometimes, if there's a reasonable doubt, they're not guilty. Charges can be withdrawn if the Crown says we have no prospect of convicting somebody, that they may withdraw the case. But the problem, as you say, is cases take so bloody long, pardon my language, to get to trial. It could be at least 2 years. And sometimes people drag it out, you know. So, and the other problem is that your picture is in the paper when you get charged. But if you're not guilty, there's no picture anymore. They don't even put it in the paper. So the only recourse theoretically is suing if it, and I don't know the facts, but if it's a case where somebody appeared to make everything up, then you could sue them for malicious prosecution. You know, it doesn't get your reputation back.
Can the accused sue him
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Not until the criminal court.
Oh, no, you'd have to wait till the case is finished.
Okay,
You
that's
gotta
very
wait.
important. Okay.
可以改一下。
OK，
That's the problem.
要等这个刑事案定了案以后，你才可以去起诉，是这个可能是这个诬告你的人。OK，
But where it becomes more difficult, more complicated, is let's say you have a teacher charged with sexual assault, and maybe it never happened. So the teacher is taken out of the classroom, or the teacher could be fired, depending on whether the teacher's in a public system or a private system or whatever. So the implications is not just criminal, could be civil as well, could be family law as well. Somebody goes to the Children's Aid and says this man has been charged with sexually assaulting this lady or woman, that and he's got small children, maybe the children shouldn't be with him anymore. So there's a lot of, you know.
In a recent case, just happened maybe a few weeks ago, in a news report. So there's in the private teaching, there is a case of sexual abusing child in music teaching. So they demonstrate the photo, just illustrates that the sexual abuse. So this is the picture I put in the file as well. If you can see, that's the picture. So it's a real case. It's happened just a few weeks ago. This is touch. But the problem is, for the teacher, for anybody knowing such teaching, the string teaching, so that's a very necessary action that the teacher has to do to correct children's the way so that.
But wait, so the child, let's back up a little. The child goes home and says, the teacher touched me?
Yes, yes,
And was this picture taken
yeah.
at the same time?
No, this is by
And
newspaper.
typical,
Newspaper. So the purpose of.
that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but the purpose of the newspaper is the editor must think this is the plan. This is the plan. This is actually a sexual abusing crime. So then.
Yeah. The purpose of the newspaper is to sell newspapers. No, that's the purpose. You're 100% right, I don't disagree. That doesn't tell me anything.
有2个问题要问法官的。第一个如果这个投诉人的小孩，他的年纪是小于10岁的，那开庭的时候，这个小孩会不会被传召出来当证人 ？Okay, now the children being abused is a minors is less than 10 years old. So when the court hearing, will the children be called to appear before the court to give witness themselves in person?
If most of the time a child, if the child is too young, the child will not be called to give evidence. If the child makes a disclosure to the police or makes a disclosure to somebody, the court has to decide whether that statement is going to be allowed by the court. Interestingly, when a child does give evidence in a courtroom, the child will be in a separate room from the accused, so that the child will not be intimidated by the accused. So what will happen is, we could have this room could be the courtroom, and then you would have the child in another room with a closed circuit TV. And the child will not see the accused. So that protects the child, and it's the same thing with if a woman is giving evidence against a man, that often there will be a screen between the two people, so that seeing the individual that you allege abused you, you won't be impacted by seeing them.
那一般呢，如果小孩子年纪太轻太小的时候，法庭一般不会传召他出庭，这就通过他到底以前给这个警察文字上写了什么东西，这个一个报告。万一法院是需要他出庭，他也不会面对面的见这个被告人 ，OK， 他有可能放在另一个房间，通过这个闭路电视就看到。不过最主要不会让他直接面对面的，就怕他受的惊吓类似的东西。那到底是在这个他们的英语的理解里面，跟我们中文的翻译有什么区别？因为 arrest 有可能是一个身体上的拘留拘捕，都是 arrest， 对吧？
Yeah, arrest is different in our culture. So if somebody is arrested for whatever reason, arrested simply means let's say somebody stopped on the highway for drunk driving. So they are arrested, taken to the police station. The police will fingerprint them, and they'll be released, and they go home. So they're not in jail. If it's serious, if they were arrested, say, on a Saturday night, and it was very serious, well, they would appear in court. They would appear in a court. The policeman would not arrest them. They'd have to spend Saturday night in jail, and probably Sunday morning, they will appear before a judge or justice of the peace, who will then release them. If the justice of the police says, I'm not going to release you, then they'll come back to court maybe in a day or 2 days. But eventually, in most cases, people get released.
那一
So
般
it's not, they'll be released at the police station or probably the next day.
一般的情况是在他们英语的世界里面 ，arrest 就警察把你带到这个警察局里面，做好一些手续就放你走了，就是一个 arrest 啊，除非有的特殊情况是星期五晚上、星期六或者星期天，警察局没有人办公，那只能暂时拘留。那这个是一些特别的情况。一般来讲，这个 arrest 不是拘留你，对吧？只是一个程序上的啊。OK， 我现在 arrest，OK， 做好了这个手续就放你走了。所以如果中文是翻译成说这个驻牢啊，或者这个拘留啊，是翻译上是有点。是文化上是有点这个差异的。
这不是 capture in custody。
对，那个。
So if the accuser later on, after establish the case, later on, she or he feels seems this case is not thing that he originally thought, like so he wants to withdraw it. Is there any way he or she can do it, or he has to continue to the very end?
If an accused wants to withdraw, if the accuser wants to withdraw a case, it would be something that would have to be discussed with the crown attorney, with the government lawyer. And it may have to go before a judge, it could go before a judge hypothetically tomorrow. But the court must believe that I am withdrawing my charge voluntarily. Voluntarily. If the court believes that I'm withdrawing my charge voluntarily, then that's okay, finished. And the other thing which is very important is a criminal record. Withdrawing a charge voluntarily, there's no criminal record. Somebody being found not guilty, there's no criminal record. And depending on what the judge decides, there may be no, but a criminal record is very important because there's so many jobs that require a criminal record check, which makes it very significant if somebody has a record.
Now, this is very important in Hong Kong. I take the Hong Kong situation. When you are being prosecuted and acquitted, when you apply for a criminal record, it say that you have been charged but acquitted, but still a record. What's the situation in Canada?
Different.
Okay.
Because usually if it's a criminal record check, it deals with, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offense? Now hypothetically, at a private school, or independent school, or even a public school, they could have their own wording that says, have you ever been charged? If they want to have a document that says, have you ever been charged with a crime? But if you haven't been convicted, if I go to teacher's college and I apply to become a teacher, and I graduate and I apply to the College of Teachers, it will say, it will ask for a criminal record check, which means conviction.
OK，那这个很重要。有人问你有没有这个刑事案底，问你有没有曾经被起诉，是两个不同的概念。这个是没有一个什么答案，就主要看问你这个机构怎么去问你。OK， 有可能你被起诉，不过无罪，释放了。你还是有一个过程是吧？不过如果人家问你有没有一个刑事的这个案底，是没有的，啊，这个 OK， 有没有其他问题？
就是关于这个，
Excuse me。
就关于警察局在这种性骚扰案件当中的角色，因为通常就是登出来呢是被告人呢是去了警察局了，然后好多这个媒体还有社会上就认为呢，他去了警察局了，就是被捕了，就是被定罪了，是不是警察局只是在当中做了一个中间的这个角色？
是立案。
He is asking about the role of the police. Okay, when the accuser make a complaint to the police station, and then the police take the case, and then the media report it. So what is the role of the police? Are they the party to judge whether this accused is guilty or not, or whatever?
If somebody goes to the police saying, alleging a crime has been committed, they will do some investigation that maybe as quickly as possible, and then they will arrest the accused. Their role is to gather evidence, but the only person that decides guilt is a judge or a judge and jury, not the police. The police role is to provide information to the prosecutor and interview people and investigate and get all documents and everything together.
Okay.
But they, other than that, they should stay out of it.
Yeah, 警察是这个扫集这个证据，对吧？然后把这个情况告诉公诉人、法院，然后是法官或者是这个陪审团是定到底这个人有罪还是无罪。警察这个角色只是这样。
我就关心这个最后法院判的时候，像这种情况，我们都是老师，经常有这种情况是吧？小孩说我 touch 他了，我说我没有 touch， 我争取你，或者我说我问了你了，我可以 touch 你吗？我在 touch， 但是最后这个小孩可能有各种原因，他说没有同意，或者是他说他不知道，到了法官最后会怎么判？我拒绝，我有 guilt， 法官怎么判？
Concerned about, okay, when one was accused of touching a child, okay, not qualifying, okay, just touch a child. But in fact, I didn't touch the child, but the child insists I touch, or even I touch, maybe just a normal touch. what will the judge or the court react to such an allegation?
Well, in a criminal case, you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The accused will give evidence that he or she didn't touch the child. The accused may call witnesses to say that I've known this person for 1,000 years and they've never done anything wrong. The child may be very young, and the child may tell 10 different stories, and the judge hopefully will say there's a reasonable doubt not guilty.
这个证据的问题，这个刑事案里面呢有一个比较要求比较高的这个证据要求 ，beyond reasonable doubt， 就无可这个质疑，真的是你有做了这个事情
他怎么证明？
才进去。
他怎么证明呢？
就是一个，比如说，有可能你提出你的这个人格的证人，说我这个老师是一个十全十美的老师，怎么会这样做嘛？啊，你可以提这个，对对，人证、旁证，或者是有 tape， 对吧？根本没碰过他，或者你碰他，那因为这个要求不一样，碰不等于一定入罪，还是有一个非法的一个 motive 啊 ，OK， 然后有可能他的这个警察通过这个小孩提他的证
And
据
it。also may depend on when the child makes the disclosure, the same day, the next day, the next week.
有可能时间，有可能这个小孩3个月以后才提出这个指
And
控，
does the child tell anybody else?
或者这个小孩告诉了全世界的人，对吧？那刚才法官也提过，他经过一个案件嘛，这个
Let's say the child discloses the next day to the mother that this person touched me. And the mother decides I'm going to take my child to the doctor. So I want the doctor in court to tell me what the child said to the doctor and whether you believe the child or not. That's important.
对，有可能他回家告诉妈妈，妈妈再带他看医生，这个医生要被传召出来，到底有没有告诉你他触摸你啊？你相不相信他？啊，就是一些环境的证据去证明，很难说1、2、3。
对啊，这个我说这个举证就非常困难。
对呀，代价的困难，他要
This
举证。
gentleman had a question.
No, I'm the same questions. If both sides couldn't provide any like a document or any evidence, and they all say a different story, so court will listen his more or listen the.
No, it's the Crown or prosecutor must prove guilt. The onus is on the prosecutor representing the state. They must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. So if I'm a judge and I hear, and I had a couple cases where teachers were accused of, and what happened was they were accused, this teacher was accused of using physical force. So by 3 or 4 kids. So what you do is you make sure that the kids, each kid, all the kids are outside the courtroom. So each one comes in one by one. So what happens is 4 kids accusing the teacher, all 4 kids tell a different story.
Yeah.
So it's made up. Because one kid will not know what the other kid said in the courtroom. So when you have a trial, you exclude all the witnesses. And the one thing you're going to always ask people is, did you discuss this case? And the longer a case takes, you know that people discuss it. You hear this crap. Oh, I never talked about it. Well, if somebody tells you, I never talked. When somebody said that to me, I knew they were telling the truth. Anytime anybody uses the word never, 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 you know it's not never. There's no never, never.
But in recent like cases like my friend in the United States, the same case last a few years, and mostly they listen to they trust the kids more, because he said, I've been abused by the teacher, and then also like the parents, they trust their kids. Say, oh, my kids they say all truth, because I trust him, I trust her. So that's the case, and
Well, it's not just what the kids said, it's all the other evidence, if there is other evidence, corroborating evidence. You know, when was the statement, when did the kid say something? Who did the kid say something to? Did he or she repeat it to somebody else? Did they tell somebody a different story? You know, there's so many other factors. I don't think you just, there has to be some credibility,
Yes.
reliability by somebody for, you know, for a judge to accept it. It's not just, you know. But the other side of it, you know, you keep in mind that most of the time, an accused does not give evidence. You know, because if you give evidence, you're cross-examined by the other side. If you don't say a word, then it's up to the Crown to prove guilty, you know.
就是在法官他审案子的时候，就是刚才提到这个旁证啊，就是这个被告的这个人格或者人品证明书是不是很重要？是数量重要呢，还是质量重要？
And I had cases in child protection cases, year after year, when I was in family court. A mother would come into court, her husband would be charged with abusing the children. And of course, she would always support her husband, because in most cases, he was the man earning the money. So she did not want him out of the house, or maybe eventually going to jail. But the bottom line was, when it happened, if it happened, she wasn't there. So what the hell is she telling me? What does she know? He wouldn't do it. How the hell do you know if you weren't there? You weren't there, you're not there, you know. If she wants to say to me, I was there when it happened and it didn't happen, okay. But don't say, you know, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's as much common sense, and after 38 years and being a judge, I don't know whether I had any sense or not, but the other thing is, as a judge, if I make a decision that somebody feels is wrong, and I'm sure that I had, or not, I'm sure I know, I had a few cases that people have a right to appeal. In our system, in the provincial court, I was in the provincial court, you could go to the court, Superior Court, you can go to the Court of Appeal, so there are opportunities. So the person that's convicted in provincial court, say of sexual assault, can appeal it once or twice.
Yeah.
If I allowed evidence that I should not have allowed, then an appeal court may say that. You should not have allowed the child to give evidence, because he or she did not understand what it meant to tell the truth, or did not, you know, their evidence was not reliable. You know.
最主要是这个作为证人，这个必须当时在场啊，因为你怎么好都没用，对吧？必须要在场。
I think we have time for one more question.
One more question?
Yeah.
Okay. I am a woman. I appreciate.
I hope so. My God. Of course, we don't know now. That's another story, yeah?
Yeah, I appreciate the society protect the rights of woman and child. And I saw you already aware that by your book, I didn't read it, like the law is not for kids and not for that kind. It's kind of become a social concern because to protect the trend is become the kind of extreme, same as Me Too, I think. So we're not talking about law, we're talking about the society. So what can we
What you're saying is the Me Too movement
Yeah,
may have gone too much
Yeah.
to support the woman. No, I mean,
yeah, it's just like this kind of sexual assault case. It's very easy to establish a case, and it's
Against the teachers.
yeah, and a kind
it's
of.
very, yeah, you're right.
So what can we do to raise some community concern and educational or what can we do to minimize the conflicts? Because as a parent, I think teacher and the students should like trust each other, and it's a happy learning environment. Right now, like teachers getting very tense. They are like they don't know how it's just like to keep the six feet social
You
distance.
can, no matter what we could be here for 50 years and still not do enough.
Mhm,
People, you cannot prevent people
mhm.
from doing things. You can't
Exactly,
prevent
yeah.
people. If they want to try to charge somebody, they're gonna go, it doesn't matter what, all you can do is take steps to protect yourself. That's all you can do. Does that guarantee anything? No, nothing is guaranteed. You can't, nothing is guaranteed. That's the problem, and you can take steps. You know, I'm always happy to come back, but you can take steps if you feel concerned, to gather as groups and make sure that, I mean, when I say to do things like, whether you're taping a session or, taping it or whatever you may be doing, or having somebody there with you, even if it's a matter of hiring a child or a young high school kid, just to be there watching is worth it. It may be worth it. Particularly if you have several kids at once, then it's worth it. If you've got 4 or 5 or 6, you know, and then you hire somebody $15 an hour, whatever the minimum wage is, to come in and watch. But you want to make sure that things like, and they tell this about teachers as well, is that whenever you have classes, keep the door open. Always keep that door open. And if somebody knows that, you know, because they always say, don't close your door, because nobody knows what's going on. And the other thing which is important, I know we're running out of time, is do not create opportunities to give people the idea that you're doing something wrong. And when I talk about opportunities, I'm talking about social media. I mean, you may have young kids, okay, that's one thing. You may have kids 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, that's another thing. But you gotta be careful about social media and emailing students. Because before you know it, they may think their relationship is different.
Okay.
That's the social media is one thing. And the other thing is, and something that when I've talked to groups of people before, if you run a private school of any kind, make sure about insurance. Don't run a school without having proper insurance to cover you in case you are sued. It is 1,000% important.
对，买保险。
So no matter what kids are doing in your school, you have insurance, an insurance policy to cover it. And, oh yeah, one other point. In terms of insurance, whether in your studio or otherwise, unless you've got insurance, it is never a good idea to transport children in your car, particularly if you have an accident, because you are not covered for that.
Thank you very much.
The main thing is if I have accomplished anything, I want to make sure that you're all very nervous.
Yes.
So we just prepared the appreciation letter, so that you, but my English is not that good. Okay.
They spelled my name right, that's good.
Not in Cantonese.
So if anybody wants to take a photo,
3, 2, 1, cheese.
Maybe you finish. Okay.
Don't send it to the newspaper.